I guess like try to get their attention, and they always told them, don't mess with those, don't mess with those, leave them alone if they try to come around. Anybody tries to come around this little person, don't listen to them, don't go with them. And one of my mom's uncles, he I guess when he was young, he used to always like go outside at night, and they used to tell him, come back in the house, don't need to be out there, he'd kind of go back outside. And so one night, um, they couldn't find him. They finally came back, and they said, where have you been? We're looking for you. He said, I was playing with those little kids, those little kids out there. And they were like, what little kids? He's like, yeah, out there by the woods, And they said, no, you don't go out there. Just leave them alone. And so he came back, and then I guess again, they came again back to their house. They lived out in the country. This is out by Wewoka, Oklahoma. Guess they came back around their house again. Another night, when he kind of disappeared. They couldn't find him. They were looking for him. Went outside, looking all around for him. Walking around through the woods, kept looking. Finally, he came back, and they were all worried and scared. And then came back, and he, where were you? What happened? Asking him, what happened? What happened to you? Where'd you go? We're worried about you. And he didn't really answer them. He didn't answer them. He just kind of pointed out that way. And so after that, he kind of changed. They said he kind of changed. He kind of wasn't as outgoing and social as much as he was before. Then he was saying that he wanted to go back out in the woods. They didn't want him to go back out there. And so they were just like, no, you're not going out there. You stay away from those woods, and you're not going out at night. And they kind of kept making him stay in. And those still Boogaji they would hear him running around their house. They'd hear him outside. And they'd kind of lock their doors. Like, everybody's staying in. Nobody's going out there and run around their house. They had a big porch that went around the whole house. So they would run along that porch. You could hear them running around their house. So they just kind of put their prayers out, put that tobacco out. They call it hiji. On my mom's side, they call it hiji. That's a tobacco medicine. So they put that hiji out and pray. And those little people kept bothering him when he was young, so they kind of just kept him in, pray for him, and he kind of became not very social. And so as he got older, he kind of stayed that way. So I always kind of just pray for him. He didn't like talking to people, so they just kind of let him stay by himself. And people ask what's wrong, what happened. They're just like, oh, he don't talk much. And as he got older, he ended up living till he was about probably his late 70s, out in the same community, same area. And my mom told me after she grew up, when he got older, a young man, that she had only seen him a couple times. Every time they would come around, he would stay in the car. He never got out of the car. When they would go to their house, he'd go in the back room. His room was in the back. He would go in his room and shut the door and never came out. So a lot of people didn't hardly see him, because when he went out, he just sat in the car. And so, she'd go to his door. My mom told me she'd go to his door and talk to him. How are you? And he'd talk to her through the door. And then he said that was kind of the rest of his life. And so she was kind of asking, what happened? Why is he like that? And I said, well, a long time ago, he was out in the woods. So still, Boogaji kept coming around. He liked to go play with them. He said he used to like to play catch with them and throw the football around and things like that, And so kind of he was like that till he passed away, all the way till he was an old man. He kind of just stayed to himself and never came out. And my uncle lived in that house still, his brother. And I would go visit my uncle out there. His name was Frank Lena, and he was full-blood Seminole. And I'd sit at his house, and he'd, sit down, visit, talk, watch basketball games, and he'd get us something to drink. We'd be talking, and we'd hear something running around outside. And I'd always think, is that a dog? You guys got a dog out there? Because I always ask questions. I always like to ask questions and find out what's going on. He's like, no, we don't have no dogs. We sit there and be talking. We hear something running around that porch. This is, probably 10 years after my uncle had passed away. And I was like, what is that? What is that? He's like, oh, don't worry about it. So what? I'm going to go outside. I'll be back. And I'd always be like, let me go with you. Let me go out there with you. He's like, no, you stay in here. Because I wasn't really scared. Because one of the things that they taught us in our Nukazogi Seminole beliefs, our grandmas uncles have always told us, don't be scared, like you got to go outside and face that fear. If something happened or something scared you, had to go out, face it, tell it to leave, get out of here, talking the language to get out of here, leave you alone.
Is that what your uncle did?
So my Uncle Frank, he went outside. He's like, let me go with you. He's like, no, he's staying here, Chaban. Chaban means like a son or young man, or a young man, kind of. That's what Chaban means. But no, I'll be back. He would go outside, and he'd be outside for 15, 20 minutes. Then he'd come out. And I'd seen my grandmas do that, my great aunts, his mom, and them. They did the same thing when I was a little kid. Something was outside, hearing things, they'd go outside and they'd walk around the whole house. And they would pray and come back in.
Did
Probably
they lay down tobacco, or?
they'd put that hitchie down and go outside and just walk around their house. Because I guess that they would say, you got to go out there and tell, you're not afraid, you're not scared, leave us alone, get out of here. And that's what they did. I seen it. And so growing up with that, that kind of helped me, overcome like certain fears and things that I experienced. And so my uncle went outside by himself. He didn't let me go. And I'm a grown up adult, This was probably like, he passed away maybe about 8 years ago. And he wouldn't let me go out there with him. He's like, I'll be back, stay in here. And so he'd go out and do whatever he did, probably went out and prayed, put some medicine down, and tell it to get out, because you could hear something running on that porch, that wooden porch around the house. So he'd come back in, we'd sit down, watch TV, watch basketball, wouldn't hear anything, and then we'd have to leave, we'd go outside, and he'd walk out on the porch with us, and we'd walk out in the woods, live way back in the trees, and we'd walk out, get in our car, and we'd just drive around. We'd be driving around, looking,
For them?
wondering if we'd see anything or anything would happen.
But you heard the little footsteps.
We heard it running. That's why I was like, is there a dog out there? And probably in my life, probably like maybe the last like 10, 15 years that he was alive, when I'd go visit him out in the woods at his house, I probably heard that about 3 times. So it was about 3 times that I heard that with my own ears, and he went out and did that little prayer ceremony or whatever he did to take care of it. And I also thought that was really interesting, because I had some other experiences with little people. I felt like it's little people around here, they're doing something, they're trying to mess with us, but maybe they were, keeping us from something that maybe, protecting us in some way. I always kind of try to understand, like, was there a meaning there? Was there a reason that happened? And so sometimes you think like, you're kind of in a hurry, or you're kind of moving too fast, you need to slow down. Like, that's what I feel like when I can't find my keys, and I know I just put them there. One time I was looking for my keys, and it was with my ex-girlfriend at the time. She was Asian, and I was like, my keys are right here. I was like, we gotta go. We were running late. I was looking around for my keys. Oh, and we were sitting on a couch, and my keys were somewhere on the table, in my pockets. I'm looking around. She's like, where are they? What'd you do with them? I was like, I don't know. I'm looking around. I was like, we gotta go. We looked for about 15, 20 minutes. And I was like, man, I don't know. I'm gonna look under the couch. So I look under the couch that we were sitting on. They weren't there. And I was like, and she had kind of been sitting on the couch. And so I was like, well, get up. And so she got up, and I lifted up the cushions on the couch, and they weren't in the crack of the cushions where stuff falls in there, money and your keys and stuff. They were in the middle of the cushion, right in the middle of the cushion under the couch. And I was like, and she saw it too, and I was like, how did they get there? We just looked at each other, and I was like, that's weird. And I was like, that's, little people probably did that. And she just was kind of like, well, I don't know what that is, and she was Asian, and I shared stories with her, but she's like, that's crazy though. That's weird, and she's a very factual type person, matter of fact. And like, I was like, I don't know, like, you saw it. I lift up the cushion, the keys are right there in the middle of that, underneath that cushion on the couch. And so, we went on our way. But I always feel like, there's some reason maybe that those things happen, and that's kind of like those things that maybe we find out later, or maybe we never find out, we never know, and that's kind of how the stories are passed down, and that we can pass those things down when, to our family or to our kids or to people that we meet, that, you know, if they're experiencing these kind of things, maybe they're trying to get your attention, maybe they're trying to give you a message, or, you know, maybe they're letting you know something is around. You know, you need to look around. You need to maybe put a prayer, be aware of your surroundings, where you're at, what you're doing. So
Put a prayer, be aware.
yeah,
Okay. So, you know, some people think that maybe fairies are involved in like disappearances that happen. You know, when people disappear, and maybe reappear later in the same area that was searched. Have you ever heard anything like that
Yeah.
associated with little people?
Yeah, that's another story. Like they tell, you know, kids, young people, adults are like, you know, something comes around, you know, like telling you, come here, come over here. You know, you don't go with it. You don't go with that still a boogaji, or you don't go with that person or that stranger. You know, it's like a teaching there. Like they say, they might take you out there. You might never come back. You might disappear. We may never see you again if you go with that, whoever that is or whatever that is. Little people, a person, a stranger. You know, so there's like a teaching there. Like, you know, if you don't know them or what they want, you know, you shouldn't go with them, because there are people that have disappeared, or they left and they came back. They don't know where they went. They don't know what happened. They can't explain where they went or how long they were gone. And I seen that at one time at an event I did in Montana on the Crow tribe, Crow agency. They have some mountains up there, and we had a youth retreat, and we went up there, and a bunch of kids. It's like a kind of culture and youth, and, you know, they're just up there learning, and elders, family, speakers, and they had a big meal. They were having a big meal, and everyone was getting ready, because after the meal they were going to have kind of like, call it a hand game. It's kind of like a traditional native game. And there was a man. They had a bunch of people were coming in. One of the drivers, they couldn't find him. He was a Mexican guy, and they couldn't find him the whole afternoon. They said after he brought the people there, he said he was gonna go for a walk or something, and then he never came back. And it was nighttime, and we were about to have dinner, and everyone was like about to have dinner, like, man, where'd that guy go? And he never came back. And somebody needs to go look for him. And he shows up, and they're like, hey, what's going on? You know, everyone's getting worried about you. You know, what happened? He said, man, I kind of got lost. You know, he said, I went walking. He said he went walking out down this road, then he cut through the woods, went to a trail. He wanted to go down by where the water was, so he was trying to walk down by where this river was. He started walking through the woods. He said he kind of got turned around. He could hear the water. He was trying to find it, and finally said one of these little kids came up here. He said one of these little Indian kids. He said he came up to me, and he was like, come here, I'll show you where the water is. And he said, I thought he was one of the little kids here. He said, but he was wearing old clothes. He was dressed like a long time ago. That's what he said, you know. And they kind of were like, what is he wearing? He said he had long hair, and he was wearing this. And they're listening to him. He said, yeah, he took me back in these woods, and we went back, and he said they lived back here, and they had like some little huts. And he said they were real small. And he said that I was wondering, like, whoa, who is this kid, you know? He's like, I got to go back. And he said, well, I'll take you back over to the water. And he took him back in the woods some more. And he said he started going faster and faster, and he kind of lost him. And he said he was walking around. It was getting dark. And he said he was gone. He started trying to go back the way he came. He just kept walking around in circles. And finally, he said he just kept walking. He started getting scared. It was getting dark. And then he said, I got to get out of here. You know, he said somehow he finally made his way out of the woods, found that road again. He said, then I was right here, right down the road. He said, and then I just walked back in. And it's like, how long was I gone? And I said, I've been gone all day. And he said, he was just like, man, they're like, you seen little people. They were telling him, you know, you saw little people. You're not supposed to follow them. You know, they were telling him the same thing. And he's like, they didn't try to hurt me. He said, they didn't try to hurt me. He said, he was just showing me through the woods. And if they had to play a trick on you, you could have been lost out there. You couldn't have found your way out. And he was just kind of like, he still didn't kind of understand it. He was like, He said, are they alive now? Or he said, was it something like a ghost? And they said, no, it's just, they live out here, you know. They live in these woods. They live back in these trees, you know. Every community has different areas where they see things. One of them is they see them by springs, like a freshwater spring out of the ground. They say if you ever find a spring, you know, just get your water and go. Get your water, do what you got, wash your face, get your water, make an offering, get some fresh water out of Mother Earth, and go. You're not supposed to hang around there. It's not for you to hang around. So you just go, because those little people and a couple other people protect that. They protect those spots. They're not for people to abuse and overuse. So they come back around if you stay there too long. So that's what they say. They're kind of around those areas. So it's pretty amazing, because some of the tribes have similar stories and similar beliefs. And that's what I've heard. That's what I've seen, experienced myself. So I thought it was kind of cool, because he wasn't Native American. Even though he was South American, you know, he described what he saw, and it was something that a lot of people who've seen, you know, these little people, kind of similar descriptions, you know, of what they saw and what they did, you know, how they acted and what they were wearing, you know. So, you know, they could be 1,000 years old, or, you know, we don't know. You know, that's the part. Like, it's those things that people can't explain doesn't mean that, you know, it's not real, or it's not true, you know. And one of our beliefs too is that when you try to discredit everything, or you don't believe anything, you know, you don't believe anyone's story because you didn't see it, or there's no proof, or there's no evidence, that you might see something. If you don't believe it that much, then you might see something, you know, to see if you really, is that really how you think? Is that really how you feel? Then they might show you something, you know. So that's one thing. We have respect for these old stories, or we have respect for these beliefs that have been around for thousands of years, you know. We don't make fun of it, you know. There's a story about that. Someone that made fun of those things, these spirits. They call them spirits or ghosts. They were making fun of this spirit. They said kept coming around. This person did. That spirit came back and went to that person and scared him. Followed him around and scared him until that person was like apologizing. So, you know, that's kind of how the stories that we like to share. That there's like a little teaching in there.
Could you just do the introduction? I'm not sure I got all of that. Just do the introduction.
Okay.
Of yourself.
Ready? Okay. My name is Brian Frijo. I'm from the Skeety band of the Pawnee tribe. That's the wolf people. And I'm from the Nukatsogi of the Seminole tribe. That's the Bear clan, my mom's side.